Hey everybody, coming to you live, and I wanted to get this report on, of course, after the game on Saturday. That just wasn't possible. I wanted to get this report on as early as I could on Sunday, but I wanted to also wait to find out when the kickoff between Oklahoma and Texas Tech this Saturday would take place, and now we know it's going to be a primetime game, everybody. It's going to be 7 p.m. November 3rd. I think it's going to be a blackout night for Texas Tech, and we'll see what kind of uniforms Oklahoma breaks up, maybe alternative uniforms for the game. But, wow, lots to talk about. Of course, got to talk about how well the Sooners are playing right now. Got to love how they're looking on both sides of the ball. The offense, just when you thought that they couldn't be any better, they continue to get better. The defense showing improvement. And for the second straight game, everybody, second straight game, Oklahoma has not turned the ball over. So since that Texas game, they've been turnover free. And the first playoff rankings, I think, will come out on Tuesday. And it doesn't really matter where Oklahoma's at right now as far as the first rankings. All that matters is where they finish in December. And the Sooners, boy, did they ever handle Kansas State. 51-14, the Sooners scoring on their first 9 possessions. They didn't punt until 8 minutes left in the game. And this is one of those games, it was almost like playground football for the Sooner offense. And Kyler Murray, you know, he was able to do whatever he wanted to do. I mean, if he wanted to run the ball, he could. And whoever he wanted to throw the ball to, he was going to be able to do that. I mean, he could eat a hot dog in this game and still have time to do what he wanted to do. The offensive line, again, sensational. And the thing I really love the most about Kyler Murray in this game was that he got so many Sooner players involved. And the question is, do you think we can win a national championship this year? The Sooners have the offensive makings of doing so. Defensively, you'd still like to see more progression. But offensively, I mean, they and Alabama are just absolutely lethal. And Oklahoma right now might have the best offense in all of the land. And, you know, not that we thought that the Sooners wouldn't have a terrific offense even after the Rodney Anderson injury. But as you notice, the Sooner ground game is still it's still top notch. It's still where you want it to be, and give the Sooners credit for overcoming the adversity of losing one of the best running backs in the country, Rodney Anderson. But as far as winning the national championship, offensively, they've got the makings of doing so, and they would have to do it in a shootout. Because defensively, I don't know if that defense is going to get to a high enough level to where you can say, yeah, offensively, defensively, the Sooners have it all. It's probably going to have to be in arena football scoring type fashion. But I do love the way the Sooner offense is playing. And like I said, the thing I love the most about Kyler Murray is that he got so many people involved early in this game. The first half, completing passes to at least 9 teammates right there. Distribution and keeping Kansas State constantly back at their heels. And by the way, very encouraging to see Trey Sermon start the game. As I mentioned on my weekly matchup show, Oklahoma kept the status of Sermon pretty much tight-lipped. Lincoln Riley not saying if he was going to go, and he went and he looked terrific early on. Some thought that Kennedy Brooks was going to get the start in this game based upon how he played last week, and he had a big run, by the way, to open that third quarter. And we will have to get lucky enough to make the playoffs first. I would definitely agree with that because it's still not in Oklahoma's hands. They still do not control their destiny. You would think 12-1 would be good enough, but things outside of their control have to happen in other conferences. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But Trey Sermon got the start, looked good. The offensive line, just like they did against T.C.U., making giant-sized holes and driving Kansas State back. I thought the offense, like I said, was one of those games where they could do whatever they wanted to do. And to not have your first punt occur until 8 minutes left in the game when the reserves are in there, you couldn't ask for anything more. And by the way, C.D. Lamb, quality is better than quantity. He only had 4 catches, but 160 yards in finding the end zone. Give it up to him. And, we saw Hollywood Brown play with a heavily wrapped ankle. For Hollywood, you feel bad for the guy for the injury last week, but he did play. But Oklahoma, you could tell, didn't utilize him a lot. They didn't have to, okay? They didn't have to at all. And great job on that first touchdown. By the way, going back to CeeDee Lamb, if you remember the first drive in this game, Oklahoma facing a third down near midfield, give CeeDee Lamb credit because I thought at first Kyler Murray had overshot him. I thought he had thrown the ball, had overthrown the ball. But you give Lamb credit for making one heck of a catch, keeping the drive going. The Sooners had to overcome a personal foul penalty later in the drive, but did so, and Calcaterra wide open for the Sooners' first touchdown. Defensively, love what I saw. I'm going to be honest with you. Love what I saw. The main objective that Oklahoma had to do in this game was contain Alex Barnes, the #1 rusher in the Big 12. And how about this? Barnes' longest run of the game was 5 yards. In fact, in the first half, Alex Barnes had less than 2 yards per carry, ended up in the game with less than 30 yards, and it was Skylar Thompson who provided a lot of the offense to Kansas State quarterback. Other than one drive in that first half, Oklahoma's defense came ready to play, and what a hit that Bookie Bradley-Hiles had, by the way, in that first half. Of course, Hiles was a little dinged up himself, but man, for a guy that does not weigh a lot, he definitely brings a very high intensity and a lot of effort to the game. But yeah, the defense was one of their better efforts that we have seen in a while, and I thought that this would be a more competitive game because I thought that Kansas State would be able to run the ball successfully, thus controlling the clock and at least giving themselves a shot and limiting Oklahoma opportunities. But Oklahoma had 9 possessions, in those first barely over first 3 quarters, and scored on all of them, 6 touchdowns, 3 field goals, and it was a very impressive performance on national television. And now we know that the Sooners will play a 7 o'clock primetime game November 3rd at Texas Tech. Lubbock is never the easiest place to play, but now you add the night element to it. And Texas Tech's got a little bit to prove after not being able to finish the job in Ames, Iowa against the Cyclones. I've said it before, Iowa State fans, you're probably sick of hearing it from everybody. Enjoy Matt Campbell while you got him. Because he will get a job at a bigger school probably soon. Matt Campbell has done one hell of a job in Ames, Iowa. And by the way, Texas Tech and Iowa State, both with 2 conference losses, still not out of the mix as far as the Big 12 championship game. But we got to talk about Texas a little bit too. And I have mixed feelings about Texas losing. I thought the Oklahoma State would cover. If you watch my 3 picks, I said Oklahoma State would cover that 3.5-point spread, but covering and then winning straight up are 2 different things. Big win for Mike Gundy's squad, and finally taking advantage of home field advantage. A place where, Oklahoma State's not played very well. It was at home, believe it or not, but yesterday that was a big factor. And for the Longhorns, they gave Oklahoma State too much in that game, tried to come back, but fell short. But I have mixed feelings. On one hand, that's the biggest rival right there for Oklahoma, Texas. So to see them lose didn't hurt my feelings from that perspective. Having said that, though, I would have rather have seen Texas run the table all the way to the Big 12 championship game. That way, Oklahoma 11-1, assuming you could run the table. Texas 11-1. Texas probably would be in the top 5, and possibly Oklahoma. And an Oklahoma win in the rematch over Texas would definitely improve Oklahoma's quality win total. Right now, their highest quality win would probably be Army. Army's only lost 2 games, but that's pretty much it as far as quality wins. So when it comes to these resume comparisons that we'll get to in December, assuming that Oklahoma can win out, you're going to have help somewhere, maybe a Michigan loss somewhere. Notre Dame, I don't know if Notre Dame's going to lose, okay? I don't know if Notre Dame's top 3 or 4 in the country, but their schedule right now plays out very well. I mean, they play USC to close the season, and USC, oh my gosh, losing to Arizona State. And this Trojan team, I'm not let's just move on. Let's not talk anymore about that. The lack of sportsmanship at the end of Texas proves that they deserve to lose that game. I think I remember that play you're talking about at the end of Texas OSU. I think his name's Hager for the Longhorns. And this was on Texas because the Cowboys are trying to run out the clock, and Hager's engaged with another player. The whistle's blown, and Hager still has not stopped. I mean, Hager is still going. And That's when things got a little bit out of control. That was a bit of frustration, I think, on Texas's part. Look, once the whistle blows, let the player go. The game was already over anyway. So yeah, the end of that game got a little bit on the ruckus side. Now, talking a little bit about the Sooners, you got to keep the focus. Okay, you got to keep the focus. Texas Tech, I know they lost, but it is an improved Red Raider team from what we saw the year before. And you're playing in Lubbock. These are the type of games. I mean, look at Texas last night, prime time at Oklahoma State, and the Longhorns fell victim. So you can never ever be too careful. And basically, you got to get this last game against Kansas State out of your mind and focus completely on the Red Raider offense that can still play and a defense that has shown some improvement from a year ago. So be prime time, Sooners and the Red Raiders. Other Big 12 action, of course, Thursday, West Virginia kicked the crap out of Baylor. That game was over fast. And T.C.U., my gosh, losing at Kansas. And I know that T.C.U. didn't have a turf got off the team. I understand that. And I know that Kansas is a little bit better. But losing at Kansas is unforgivable, okay, if you're in the Big 12. That should be illegal, okay? That should be an arrest if you lose in Lawrence. And that's what happened to TCU. And wow, going from the Big 12 championship game one year to losing the next year in Kansas against the Jayhawks. Inexcusable. Well, the Sooners, they were not perfect, but pretty damn good on Saturday. Defense showing massive improvement, containing Kansas State's big-time running back in Alex Barnes, and the Oklahoma offense doing whatever the hell they wanted to do on Saturday and making quick work of the Wildcats. And you have to wonder how much longer will Bill Snyder be the coach. I think it's one of those situations where you look at Kansas State, this particular team. Obviously, he's the reason why Kansas State football got out of the dumps in the late 80s, the greatest turnaround in college football history, a couple of Big 12 championships, one of the great college football coaches of the last 30, 40 years. But he's up there in years, and I do think that he'll be back next year, provided that his health is not an issue. But at some point, Kansas State's got to make progression. They got to make progression in their recruiting, and if anything, finding the right players for what Bill Snyder's looking for, because you notice the talent at Kansas State. It's never been amongst the highest. They've been able to get a lot out of what they've got. But, you know, I think the last time I saw Kansas State was 9th in recruiting in the Big 12 out of 10, only ahead of Kansas. So for Kansas State, things might have to change a little bit. Final score again, 51-14. Thanks for your patience getting this report on. The day after the game, sometimes those things just happen. And again, it'll be a primetime kickoff between Oklahoma and Texas Tech. By the way, West Virginia will play at Texas at 2:30, and that would have been the kickoff time for the Sooners and Red Raiders had Texas won last night, but that didn't. The Big 12, it's up in the air. For the Oklahoma Sooners, 4 regular season games to go. Hopefully the Big 12 championship is in the horizon, and if so, this college football season for Oklahoma can still be a playoff-type run. And again, appreciate the comments from everybody. And we'll continue to do more live shows in the future. And, of course, the first college football playoff rankings will be out on Tuesday. And like my last comment just said, Boomer, Sooner, and we'll see you next time. Weekly matchup show with Oklahoma, Texas Tech coming soon. Boomer, Sooner, Zach.